Well, I could have sworn that we were done with him, but it turns out that my trilogy of videos about Seth MacFarlane's creative enterprises has a surprise epilogue, a little after-meal taste tray of wine and cheese before you go home and realize how much damn money you spent. That's right, we're going to be talking about the Orville, one of the most requested video topics that I get from people in my comments, and I am nothing if not a sucker for pleasing people, so here we are. Now, this is a bit more of a venture than the classic singular episode fare, as we are kind of digging into an array of episodes featuring a character who has specifically been commented on by the writers and creators of this. We wanted to make Star Trek, but it turned out that was already made, so we made the Orville instead, as being transgender. Now, personally, I actually think that the story has a lot more in common on the face of it with an intersex experience than a transgender one. But we kind of hit a mesh of societal pressure and biological interference by external forces at birth, so yeah, it can sort of be taken in either direction for interpretation by the audience if they want it. Anyway, enough wasting time. Let's talk about the sponsor for this video, the people who made it possible for you to watch it. The sponsor's been you. This is a Patreon plug. If you want to support the channel, go to my Patreon. The link is below. It helps me to make videos like this and for you to feel like you supported me making it, because you did.
Hello! Money! I like money!
With all that said, it's on to the first episode that draws our attention here. Season 1's episode 3, About a Girl, released in 2017. Now, a key part of this episode, before we get into the commentary, is its focus on the characters Bortus and Clyden, using them as a personal way for the audience to connect with the species they belong to, the Moclans.
It must be done.
Yes. I will make the arrangements.
A single-gendered species, and I use single-gendered there rather than single-sex like Seth MacFarlane used during this interview posted on Sway's Universe, because as we see with Bortus and Clyden's newborn child Topa, Moclans can be born as what we would recognise and what they recognise as female, and they get surgeries which turn them into male because Moclans view females as weak and have phased them out societally.
Your duty is to cure illness.
Bortus, this is not an illness.
Do you see why this is a bit of a complex interlapping of both transgender and intersex allegory now? Do you get it? Because, well, if you don't, you certainly will when we're all done here, hopefully. With that mentioned, the episode begins with the crew of the ship standing around the newly born baby, telling Bortus how rare and special this child is, as Topa is a female born to an all-male species. Partly amazed because the rest of the crew doesn't know the exact deal with the Moclans surgically altering their children to be men at birth thing, and instead go off the knowledge that it happens once every 75 years as a genetic rarity.
In fact, a Moclan female is born roughly once every 75 years.
Well, here's to the only girl in town.
I mean, is that actually true, or is it more frequent and they just surgically alter them and pretend that they were never women in the first place, right? Do they just ignore the actual statistics? Is it that plane meme? I don't know. The Moclan parents then shoo everyone else away to make the cultural decision to correct this genetic error. This whole episode then gets its central premise when Bortus goes to the doctor on the ship and tells them that they will have to be the one who does the corrective surgery to make this child a male, to the pretty shocked expression of the doctor.
To conform our child. To make her a male.
See, this is going to turn into a discussion between the norms that are practiced by the Moclans, which we might not agree with, and the rest of the crew who will engage with it from the history that they have developed themselves as humans, I guess, who have women. This pops up instantaneously within the conversation between the human doctor and the Moclan parent, as she refuses to perform a sex change on a healthy baby child, as that would break the Hippocratic Oath, And yes, you are correct, there is some gigantic human-centric hypocrisy massively hovering all over this conversation. But let's see if they address it before we bring it into this. Bortus then goes to the captain to complain about this, seeing it as a doctor refusing to respect those cultural differences, and we get an array of complexity added to this because sex change got used earlier on. Bortus says that he wants the child converted to the male gender, and Captain Seth McFarlane calls this a transgender operation.
You want to perform a transgender operation on a baby?
Guys, what are we doing here? These all mean different things, and I would have hoped that by the year sci-fi future that we could have got some of these terms better locked down. Seth MacFarlane is not super on board with making the decision for the baby, as surely they should get to choose themselves. Good. However, Bortus clings to this idea that being a female is effectively the same as a degenerative birth defect such as a cleft palate, and therefore can be dealt with without any of the person's say in the matter. Bad. However, the truth is that this is a lot more than just a cleft palate, and I know, we still have 30 minutes to give the episode a chance to explore that before I have to bring up why they've mentioned the more obvious allegorical comparison for humans here, the whole intersex thing. Bortus is unsuccessful here, as Seth makes it clear that ordering a doctor to perform an unnecessary and not medically required surgery against their will would be in violation of Union laws, and that despite the Mocklans being able to do whatever the hell they want on their own planet, this is a Union ship which follows Union rules. Okay, fair enough. Very difficult navigation of various species and the societies kind of addressed.
Your planet is a member of the Union. For me to order Claire to do something like this would be in violation of 100 laws.
The bridge crew then begins having an open discussion about the Mocklan baby and its sex change, which is probably against some kind of HR thing, and it's really divided between the people who are humans and seem to be coming at this from a, well, there ain't nothing wrong with being a girl, after all, I'm a girl and I know girl who are fine, and I would be angry if that happened to me and I were girl, and the robot who seems confused about why they would refuse to do a surgery that is not medically dangerous.
Oh, are you guys talking about Bortus's baby sex change?
My God, does the whole ship know about this?
Yes.
Pretty much.
Bortus, however, alerts the Mocklan people, and they agree to send a ship to intersect with the Orville and perform the surgery on the baby, as this would not violate any of those Union laws. A lot of the crew are still against this, however, with Seth being very pissed that Bortus went around his back to pull this stunt off, and because this whole thing could blow up into a big old military debacle. As the Mocklans want to correct the gender thing thanks to that whole society and culture we've mentioned a bunch of times, and the humans see it as them being involved in supporting a medical procedure that they do not agree with, as they would have to hand the baby over to the Mocklan ship.
We are coming to take the Mocklan female.
If you want to know which side I'm on here, the answer is... Well, I agree that you shouldn't be performing medically unnecessary surgeries on a child just because your culture demands that you do it. I think that it's dangerous to apply that, and it takes away a lot of choice for the child who cannot make it, and gets no ability to do so. So, yeah, I'm with the humans here, but it's not a human-centric thing.
You humans are all racist.
Seth then brings up a point in a private discussion with his first officer, Kelly, about how he is doubting this decision to not approve the handover of the baby, as if he had a child who, well, had a whole third leg or something like that, and they made the decision to remove that third leg to conform the child, nobody would second guess that choice. Which Kelly is annoyed by, because that to her doesn't feel the same thing as making a girl into a boy. Though I would, I suppose, question how a person who was born with 3 legs and grew up with 3 legs and knew that this child could live a full and happy life with those 3 legs if they wanted to, well, I wonder how those 3-legged people in their community would see this situation, wherein their concerns about us so easily dismissing this third leg as a genetic aberration to be corrected might be. would they not also feel attacked as a person if it's like, oh, well, that's just something that we need to get rid of, that's a bad thing, clearly, despite the fact they've lived so well with it so far.
Imagine that baby was born with a third leg, and we had the doctor remove it. Now, no one would think twice about that, right?
Also, I'm sure that there has to be a more easily linked idea from human culture to this allegory that many people engage in. But the show just isn't doing it, and is instead circling less related things as examples. You've got 20 minutes, Seth. You've got 20 minutes to mention the intersex elephant in the room, or I'm gonna get mad. However, Seth and Kelly decide that what they need to do is prove to Bortus that being a female is not a handicap, which must be fixed, by having him box a female member from the Zalayan species, Alara Katan, who is super strong because her planet deals with high gravity, a kind of Dragon Ball Z situation.
Increasing gravity simulation. 450 times planet's normal.
I don't know if having Bortus get beaten up by a woman is going to correct his decades of bias towards the gender within his own species, especially because I don't see how seeing females of a species perform well would alter the perception of his own. Legitimately, conservatives in our real world don't let the impressive achievements of female athletes, musicians, mathematicians, coders, scientists, whatever, alter their view that women are meant to be in the kitchen and raising kids. And that's all they're good for compared to men.
Driving, parking, most of the STEM fields, rock and roll.
Yeah, boys are better at all of those things.
And I don't believe that having a female dog play basketball against conservatives and beat them, despite there being nothing in the rules against it, would change those conservatives' minds. It just seems like confusing logic.
My turn.
And yeah, all this boxing match does is piss Bortus off, who views this whole thing as his workmates interfering with his personal life. I mean, universal ethics of performing a sex change on a child aside, he isn't wrong there. Despite all this, we do see a little bit of the Moclan gender bias here, when Bortus refuses to tell Clyden that he got his ass kicked by a girl, instead referring to it as an explosion on the ship.
Why the ice pack? Dr. Finn can repair your injury.
Do you not have somewhere you need to be?
Which I think does showcase how the Moclan view of females being inferior does extend beyond just their own species in a way, if they're also demeaning the wider female representation of the galaxy by not wanting to admit that a female in a species beat them up. Then some crew members swing by to spend time with Bortus, and watch the Rudolph claymation Christmas film, with its message of how Rudolph's unique advantage of having a red nose was something that came in positive by the end, and that if he had been euthanized by his father as a child, then Christmas would not have been saved. All of which is used as a meta plot to get Bortus to potentially see being female as a surprise positive.
Of course. Without Rudolph's nose, Santa would not have been able to complete his voyage.
I get where the show is going, but it's also getting us further and further away from having the much more interesting point of humans using this as a chance to examine their own culture through it, and consider the ways that our own culture might act the same as the Moclans that we just don't properly criticize. As well as making me think more and more that Seth has no idea what being trans is. Because none of this episode at this point is trans, apart from Seth mistakenly calling this a transgender operation as the captain.
A transgender operation. Transgender operation. Transgender.
We haven't claimed gender reassignment surgeries as our community thing. That was practiced non-consensually by you cis people well before we started doing it consensually. Bortus and Clyden then have a conversation now about the child, with Bortus arguing that the child should be left unaltered and a girl. Wow. One single human film managed to break decades of conditioning. It really is a Christmas miracle.
You must hear the tale of Rudolph. You will rethink your conviction, I promise you.
And the show kind of goes in a smarter direction here, of having this be a Moclan v Moclan debate, rather than having it be a bunch of different cultures telling one culture that they're wrong. I think that lets it get much more into territory that examines the underlying reasons for something being a tradition/way of things, rather than having it seem xenophobic. Clyden believes the Moclan way that states women are inherently bad and inferior. Bortus pushes this idea that their girl could do many great things as a girl, and that they're taking away that option by removing that choice.
We do not know what kind of future we are taking from her. She may be destined to do great things.
Bortus is really pushing this Rudolph thing, before Clyden reveals why they are so steadfast in their beliefs. And it's because they were born a female and went through the same sex change themselves as a child.
Because I was born a female.
Oh God. Oh sweet God, do you hear that? That's another ton of complexity thrown on top of this already nightmarishly navigated topic. Clyden, perhaps, is super convinced by the belief system because they had it forced on them, and therefore believing it to have been the best possible choice is the only way to view that lack of choice on their end as okay, or something that they can live with, rather than having it spiral into them hating their society and parents who did that to them when they were younger. That one actually does have a lot of parallels with how us humans react to things, justifying terrible stuff because it made us who we are today, and surely it can't have been bad because people we love did it to us. And that's a horrifyingly normalized way of dealing with some really dark shit in people's history. This is gonna be a long video touching on a lot of things, huh? I'm already getting that idea. Bortus and Clyden have an argument over this new revelation. Bortus being angry that Clyden didn't tell him, Clyden being afraid that Bortus would have left him if he'd found out, the baby crying because a bunch of adults in the room are yelling.
I was unprepared.
And why did you not tell me then?
This argument only leads, however, to cementing their two positions. Bortus thinking about how Clyden had the choice taken from them, and Clyden thinking that they would have been an outcast if their parents hadn't done the operation. All of which is happening as the Moclan vessel, a vessel full of people who very much do not want a Moclan female to exist because it would diminish their entire heritage, is approaching. I'm beginning to suspect that the intersex thing will not be getting brought up. Sorry, team. Much as always, the intersex community's struggle and history is possibly getting forgotten. Kelly begins fighting with the Moclan commander of the vessel, who states that the Moclan state sides with the parent who agrees with the operation, and Kelly is annoyed that a culture would be opposed to the gender that she belongs to.
Where she will undergo the corrective procedure.
Don't start passing out penises just yet, Captain Vorak.
And this whole thing is really looking like it might blow up into a big old diplomatic debacle. Seth argues that nothing should be done until the admiral in charge of the situation makes a decision that will keep this interspecies union from going into a civil war. And unfortunately, the Moclans do not agree with that assessment, and say that they will instead be seizing the child and taking it to Moclus within the hour. Bortus escalates this to a tribunal, and gets Kelly to be his lawyer/advocate, because no Moclan would be an advocate for this cause, am I right?
No advocate on Moclus would defend such a thing. To my knowledge, the advocate need not be a Moclan.
Hooray! Looks like we're going to Moclus to do a courtroom trial. Though, I would suspect that the Moclan version of a trial might not be the same as a human one, despite the fact that all the humans seem to think that it is. Surely they have a different legal system. We get to Moclus, the humans talk about how the whole planet is turned into one big industrial center, and their main production is weapons, which they openly test in the airspace around the city, as if that's something that humans could never be accused of. Dangerous weapons testing? Don't ask Bikini Island.
Towering waves set in motion appear to be only shallow ripples. The beach at Bikini gets a pounding.
And then they almost get exploded because Moclan Air Control runs them into one of these testing sites by not updating them on it being added earlier that day. Yeah, it's pretty hostile shit here from a culture towards what they see as outside interlopers supporting something that goes against their foundational tenets. Not that surprising, frankly. The trial begins, and it seems like it is very much the same as one of our courtrooms. Similar setup, similar format, which is great news for the humans, and especially great for Kelly, who has to be a lawyer in that courtroom.
Please begin your inquiry.
Lieutenant Commander Bortus.
A bunch of points are brought up during this that we've already covered, so I won't waste much time on them. The Moclan traditional side is arguing that not going through with this surgery will forever shame the child and make her life impossible to live in the way that normal Moclans are able to. That by putting the choice into her hands when she's old enough to make the decision, the damage of being a girl will already have been done, and that surely this is more harmful for the child. The more radical and liberal side attempts to showcase that being a woman is not a bad thing, that women are not inferior, and that Moclan's practicing this is not actually scientifically accurate, which is illustrated by having females of other species display that they are just as capable. Like I said, nothing we haven't heard before, and the sad truth here is that ultimately Moclus needs to drastically change internally, and it needs that change to come from its own population with inspiration by female members who can display and revolutionize those concepts over decades and decades. Something which Bortus and the Orville do not have at this moment. So yeah, the trial goes poorly.
If there were a Selayan male here, he could reshape the titanium with half as much effort.
Showcasing outsider differences between genders is not convincing to the Moclan jury, because why would it be? They really should have just gone with the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer Saving Christmas film option. That at least seemed to convince Bortus in almost no time at all, so it's got more of a shot than having women show that they're good. However, the trial does have at least one thing that we should bother talking about in some depth, in that the Moclans do at least bring up the whole circumcision thing.
Tell me about your penis.
Did I miss a segue of some kind here?
Are you, what is the term, circumcised?
Remember how there are certain human cultures which engage in optional gender mutilation of children at birth for no other reason than tradition and heritage? And why is that so different to the Moclan choice of conforming gender? The doctor on the stand at the time kinda gets caught out on that one, because she admits that while she refused the sex change, she would perform a circumcision if asked, arguing that a circumcision is not a life-changing surgery, despite the fact that it is a medical choice that the baby has no say over, which can affect a variety of different factors down the line, having both benefits and risks associated with it that make the whole thing fucking complex, and maybe something that an adult should be choosing for their own body. Isn't this a hypocrisy within human society then, argue the Moclans? Is this not a version of human supremacy masked as normalization? To which the humans don't really have much to respond with. Seth then decides to do something drastic, because the trial is going really poorly for the humans. The drastic choice being scanning the entire Moclan planet to find a female who hasn't been altered, and to bring her to the trial. This right here is a better idea than anything else they've had so far, to be honest. However, the fact that they find the first female in a cave up in the mountains hidden away from Moclan society sort of feels like it's illustrating the Moclan point about becoming a social outcast more strongly. Maybe at least they can showcase that Moclan females are not in fact weaker as the species seems to believe. While the Moclans seem very upset by this woman turning up, Kelly reminds the judge that there is no rule which says a Moclan female can't testify. Hey, I knew the Air Bud reference I made earlier would come full circle. Look at that.
Arbitrator, to my knowledge, there's no prohibition against the testimony of a Moclan female.
That is correct.
This Havana tells the tribunal that she was going to die in isolation, but that she came down because she refuses to let them take the opportunity away from this child, refuses to let this injustice in her eyes continue. making a big, bold speech about it, illustrating how she has no regrets about being given that choice, that she is happy learning to love who she is. Before then revealing that she is in fact the greatest living Moclan writer, who published herself as a man to remain in secret, and that revelation actually does seem to send some tremors, does seem to really possibly set up some conversation/changes to Moclan society.
Why don't you ask him?
No. I do not believe it.
Unfortunately, one great speech and literal examples isn't enough to stop the sex change in the eyes of the court, something which might not be too surprising to all of y'all from the USA with the recent abortion shit on the Supreme Court. Moclan society might change one day, but that day is a far call away, and is not soon enough to stop the baby from being forcibly gender swapped to a son. And that's where the episode ends.
And we must give him a good life, whoever he becomes.
Well, I gave the Orville and Seth McFarlane a shot. I gave them their chance in this episode, but as I mentioned near the beginning, this is first and foremost clearly not a transgender thing. It's not even closely related to any transgender debates or discussions that are currently happening. We're not in any way, shape, or form involved in arguments around the non-consensual surgical alteration of babies to conform their bodies to the gender expectations of the culture they're born into at birth. You know what that does almost match, idea for idea, in an illustration of human reality sense, and would have made far more sense to both make this episode a direct metaphor for it, as well as putting it into the episode as part of the discussion around human history, and how we have engaged in this exact same behaviour towards a whole ass community of people. It's not people with a cleft palate, it's not people with a third leg, it's not even people with circumcisions, as they dived into at the end there. It's the pretty fucking obvious real life experiences and nightmarish medical practices around intersex people.
Doctors today continue to do medically unnecessary cosmetic surgeries on these children.
Seth, what the fuck are you doing? Do you just not know that they exist? Altering intersex bodies in ways that they cannot consent to as part of a long-term decision that will forever impact their lives and possibly have medical issues related to it, all because the parents want their kid to have a normal life and view that normal life as being within the strict gender binary expectations that deem any aberrations as wrong and in need of correction. Yup, that's an intersex thing. And almost beat for beat what went down here in this episode. I don't know why nobody on the Orville fought to relay that part. Nobody fought to consider how this reflects upon our own decades and decades of mistreatment of those that were seen by doctors as being wrong, despite their intersex conditions not having any long-term problems that would have required such massive and invasive surgeries.
I now have to take this medication, which potentially I didn't have to. Being essentially sterilized from such a young age is really damaging.
Seriously, it's a huge shame that the Orville doesn't directly bring this up, that the Orville doesn't make these points. It's a shame that Seth called this transgender and tried to relay this episode as a trans one, because intersex people need more media attention and societal knowledge brought to the struggle that they have faced for such a long time. They need awareness made about what has happened to them, and what is still happening in many hospitals around the world when a baby is born with either physical features that are treated as deformities when they are merely just a random but ultimately harmless part of that person's biology. Alongside that, the whole Clyden coming out with how they were not made aware of their own secret biology until they left Moclus would have been a good chance to showcase how the same things happen to intersex people. How so often their parents and their doctors will go out of their way to make sure that the intersex person does not know about themselves. A choice that can end up being ultimately harmful if something comes up, and they or the medical team that tries to help them doesn't know the fact that they're intersex. It should not be seen as shameful. It should not be something that is hidden away, surgically corrected and brushed under the rug. Intersex people should and need to be able to live as themselves openly, and make their own informed decisions about their bodies when they have the capability to understand the consequences of those surgeries. Like what we do with trans people. Most of us have to go through quite a few hoops to get pretty much any part of trans healthcare, even the most minor and reversible elements. And yet when it comes to conforming bodies to a cis expectation, there is no such requirement. And in fact, parents are encouraged to push their kids into those surgeries.
The narrative they were crafting for my parents was that I was like an underdeveloped female child. They didn't want to say that like, I'm actually intersex, I'm actually not female or male.
Anyway, that's the big point I wanted to make here about this episode in particular. And now I want to move on swiftly because we have plenty of stuff still to go. Remember, there are 3 more whole episodes that I'm trying to cover here. Oh god, what am I doing? This is never gonna get out on time. Moving from Season 1, we jump to Season 2's Episode 12, Sanctuary, our next step on the story of this baby and what they represent to the show's narrative, specifically in regards to the wider cultural aspect of the Moclans. The episode begins with a discussion about the Moclans and their relation to the Union, some stuff about weapons exchanges with the humans and transportation of scientists, really establishing how important Moclus is for the military side of things.
The Moclans have proposed a new round of weapons upgrades for all Explorer-class vessels and above.
And why are they doing this? Oh, I don't know, maybe down the line we might have a horrible choice between picking to ignore atrocities in the name of maintaining some kind of alliance with a group that is viewed as essential to security, or denouncing them rightfully and making an ethically correct move at the cost of losing their weapons and stance, a commentary that I am sure has no comparisons to the modern day, and anything that like the US is getting up to right now.
And as we speak, the House is voting on a $28 billion aid package for Israel.
Yeah, no, nothing political here. It turns out that those scientists getting transported from Moclus are hiding something though. They are acting very sussy baka, as the kids might say. I'm actually not really sure about that one. I kind of accept that I'm falling behind with the times rapidly. And whatever is suspicious about them is sitting in a big blue glowing box that could be anything. Though I already have my suspicions about what it is because I've included it in this video specifically about Moclans and their gender and the metaphorical allegories it holds to us the audience. I'm saying it's probably a female child they're trying to save from forced sex change. That's what I'm getting at there. We get to see a bit of Topa in action, the character who was that baby from the first episode, and is seen here grown up a hell of a lot already. They're fighting with girls and calling them weak and espousing the gender supremacy that one has come to really expect from the Moclan culture, especially when your parents teach it to you at an early age.
I don't share with females. Why not? My papa says females are weak.
Got a real little incel on our hands here. The teacher brings in the parents because Topa pushes a girl over, and Bortus and Clyden are defensive of their child. Bortus trying to suggest that maybe it was provoked, and Clyden going with the more aggressive, sexist stance that perhaps it would be better if the males and females were taught separately to keep them apart.
Perhaps you should consider separating the male and female children.
None of the other boys.
Ah, Jordan Peterson. It's nice to see that you made an appearance as a surprise guest for writing this character. They really do reflect you.
We don't know what the rules are. Like, what? Here's a rule. How about no makeup in the workplace?
It all sort of plants the seed for a future familial dispute between these two parents, and what they view as the correct way to teach Topa about Moclan culture, especially heightened by that whole the entire last episode we discussed. Topa keeps espousing the Moclan opinion on female inferiority, talking about how Clyden encouraged it, which Bortus seems annoyed by. It's the same problems again. One of them is stuck in the traditionalism of the Moclan ways, and the other wants to encourage tolerance and freedom of choice around this. Though I really think what they should be going with here is the we're on a Union ship full of different species that do not share our particular very anti-woman stance, and therefore maybe we should teach our child how to get by in that environment without attacking and pissing off every other goddamn crew member and their kids. I don't know. Seems like a strong argument for a little bit of assimilation there. Bortus then goes to the Moclan scientists on board, as there is a power anomaly in their room, and finds the secret box they're keeping. A box draining a bunch of power, which contains a baby. A female Moclan baby. Damn, I am a good guesser. These Moclans are fleeing Moclus with the intention of seeking asylum on a planet that would shield them from extradition, as their baby will be taken from them by Moclus and go through that whole sex change thing which they don't view as necessary. They also talk about the trial, and about knowing of it, which does relate to that whole thing I mentioned about waves occurring in Moclan society, and slowly pushing it in a direction, but certainly not fast enough to combat such extreme traditionalism in the Heartland.
Commander, I know of your trial. I know you understand what is happening here.
Bortus then removes Topa from class and brings Topa to the scientists to show Topa the female baby in the box, and to hopefully dissuade Topa of those extremist reactionary views that he is internalizing, to give him the knowledge that female Moclans do exist, and that they're not so different despite the fear that is held over them.
Look at her, Topa. She is not so different from you or I.
The scientists then get delivered off the ship with their baby. Bortus is dragged into the captain's office, and it turns out that Topa is maybe not so great at keeping secrets as Bortus thought, or not so easily moved by the sight of a female Moclan to cast off all that bigotry, leading to Topa telling Clyden, who then told the captain. Bortus gets reamed out by the rest of the crew for the choice that he made, that what if the baby wasn't even those scientists' child, and that maybe they kidnapped it for reasons to do something terrible, and now the Orville has to go after the ship to make sure that it wasn't part of some illegal child napping shit, like a baby smuggling testing ring.
For all we know, they kidnapped that baby.
I do not believe so.
Though arguably it was transporting a female Moclan to escape the forced sex change, which I would assume would already be enough to get them in trouble in Moclus's eyes, right? It turns out that the vessel has vanished. They do some fancy stuff to find its trail, and they discover a secret place hidden within a nebula, which is where the scientists are really going. A whole plot line which feeds the idea that something nefarious is happening here. Though we then discover quite quickly that it is in fact a red herring juke for the audience and the Orville crew, that in reality what is happening here is that the scientists were fleeing to the secret star system, which contains a planet on which live a bunch of Moclan females, in a sanctuary, which is the name of the episode, so that's pretty funky.
And those that do risk everything to escape Moclus and make their way to the sanctuary.
Anyway, yeah, it turns out that this is basically a refuge for all those women who wanted to stay women, or raise their kids as women, to come and live free from the intensely sexist society of the Moclans, and that they are led by Hivana, that lady from the trial, and she reveals that she set this up years ago, which makes me really confused about the timeline. Like, it's stated that the first episode we saw would have been around a year and a bit before this one, which makes me think that Hivana lived in a cave, but was also making dozens of trips to this sanctuary, and was talking about dying alone and out of society, while also setting up a bunch of transports for other women, and it's all just sort of confusing as far as dates go, and the way that people were acting in the last episode.
I had planned to die up there, undiscovered.
Unless I guess Hivana was just hiding in that cave for like 1 second and then just lied about what she was actually doing. Regardless, the sanctuary is very anti-outsiders, because if outsiders leak this information to the Moclan government and their location, then the Moclan government would do some extreme shit to cover up this many Moclan women existing, as it's a direct challenge to their current status quo. We then see a few different options here. The Moclan females want to flee to a new colony. Captain Seth proposes that instead they get official Union recognition as an independent system, and that way they will be safe from Moclus.
Let me suggest an alternative. Let us go to Union Central and submit an application for recognition as an independent state.
And Hivana commits to the fact that revolution is inevitable, and that open defiance is the only real way forward. Not an incorrect message to land on. Hivana goes with the Orville to the Union Council, all of which upsets the Moclans as they wish to take, prosecute, and forcibly sex change all the Moclan women from the colony. See that previous point about how this threatens their establishment, and that the Union finding out about these female Moclans would really jeopardize the position of Moclus in the eyes of its allies. Hivana also discovers about Dolly Parton while investigating all the great stuff that women on Earth were able to get made within their own fight to obtain civil rights and equality.
You'll find centuries of art of all kinds from the women of Earth.
Who is she?
That's, Dolly Parton.
Honestly, a pretty good person to land on for Hivana to declare as the voice of the revolution. All people can sympathize with the feminist message of working 9 to 5. What a way to make a living. Barely getting by. It's all taken and no given. They just use your mind and they never give you credit. It's enough to drive you crazy if you let it.
Okay then. Go Dolly.
The Moclans go before the council, and I'm a little worried about the effectiveness of this body due to the fact that our real-world United Nations is about as fucking useful as a bag of potatoes. No wait, that's unfair. To potatoes. They at least serve a serious purpose and don't end up implicitly okaying genocide through their own uselessness.
I find that there are reasonable grounds to believe that the threshold indicating the commission of the crime of genocide against Palestinians as a group in Gaza has been met.
Hivana makes a big-ass speech again about what this society faces, about the intolerance that they risk, and it's a very good speech which appeals to the oppression that exists within every society, and it's on us all to try and help those who are denied rights in every culture to give them justice.
The history of moral progress can be measured by the expansion of fundamental rights to those who have been denied them.
It's unfortunate that Hivana's speech-to-success ratio has been a big 0% so far, which makes me more than a little worried that Moclus will use its economic and military involvement to force the unethical choice for the Union, which they do threaten to do, while also at the same time sending a Moclan war vessel to the colony to monitor it and threaten the Orville in orbit.
What?
Oh man, we really stepped in it today.
The captain argues with the human admirals about the way that humanity is willing to put these female Moclans in the firing line, specifically so they can maintain the supply lines and connections to Israel. From Moclus to defeat and contain the current threat to their alliance, the Iranian threat. There I go again. The Kalon threat. God, I'm doing my best to maintain the totally non-political nature of this sci-fi show, but it's surprisingly hard.
The Union turns a blind eye to Moclan custom because we need their weapons.
You're out of line, Captain.
Bortus and Clydon then have another fight, with Clydon suggesting that they will be leaving to Moclus if the Moclans leave the Union, and Bortus pointing out how Clydon has been intolerant of the other people on the ship, and constantly dismissive of them, and does not like that the same attitudes are being taught to their child.
Your mind remains closed, and you wish to raise our child to embrace this ignorance.
Then, to cut off that awkward debate that seems to keep happening over and over again and really looks like it's going to inevitably head towards a divorce, a bunch of shuttles go to the surface of the colony, and the Moclan ship raises its shields, making it seem as if Moclus is taking the matter into its own hands on this, despite Biden asking them to not escalate the situation. I mean, the Union, not Biden. It now looks like a diplomatic incident is inevitable, if not open war, despite the efforts of Admiral Ted Danson.
Ambassador, let's not let this get out of hand. We can and will find a diplomatic solution.
Always happy to see Ted Danson appear in something. Bortus and Kelly get unofficial confirmation to go down to the planet and stop the Moclans from seizing the females. The Orville fires on the Moclan ship to destroy their tractor beams, and the two ships begin engaging in a dogfight. Meanwhile, on the ground, The Mocklans are beginning the gender cleansing of the Mocklan females, as Bortus and Kelly turn up to stop them with the aid of the female revolutionary forces. The male Mocklans begin getting their asses kicked and killed to the sound of Dolly Parton again. Hell yeah, I guess it really is the symbol of defiance for these people. It's a little weird to see what is quite literally the beginning of a war happen to such a bop, but maybe we should just do that more often. Just a suggestion, CNN, if your recent broadcasts could just have Dolly Parton over them, maybe people would watch them more. The Space UN proposes a compromise while this is going on, suggesting that they will not recognize the sovereignty of the colony will stop immigrating women to their land, and in return, the Mocklans will agree to not take any action against them now or in the future. A deal that is slightly weakened by the jump cut from it to the current military actions of the Mocklan government against the colony illegally. The agreement is reached, however, and the deal is cut. A deal which kinda sucks because it's throwing future Mocklan females under the bus. It's basically long-term screwing over their struggle in the name of a short-term gain for the Union, and the chance to alleviate the concerns of the Union members about their participation in space genocides. Oh, Space UN, you remind me so much of my home Earth, and its UN too.
The Union agrees not to recognize the sovereignty of the colony at this time.
Hivana, though, still views all of this as just part of the process towards revolution. That in no way, shape, or form is this the end. And honestly, based on all of history, I would say she's right. Oppressed people never stop fighting. Back on the Topa front, it seems as if Topa is getting along with a human female, which means that maybe that lesson wasn't completely wasted, and that he is in some way becoming more tolerant, despite the proclivities of Clyden towards traditional sexism. And that's the episode. Now, this one is frankly more of a transitionary episode. I don't really have too much to go into in what it represents, but for the next 2 episodes that I'm covering to make any sense at all, we needed to do this bridging moment to illustrate how things go the way that they do in the show's narrative. It's all part of the progression, you know. And the first of those next episodes is going to be Season 3's Episode 5, A Tale of Two Topas. An episode which is centered very much around that character, and really begins to illustrate some of the harms that come to a child from being forcibly sex-changed against their consent and knowledge, and what that can do internally and mentally. The episode itself begins with the... Wait a minute. Is this really an hour and 15 minutes long? I don't got time for that. Alright, look, we're going to speed through this to the points involving Topa that actually build towards something, because holy shit, I'm not making a 3-hour-long video just for Seth McFarlane. The entire first act doesn't really have much for us here. The crew of the Orville finds some archaeological treasures, Topa doesn't do well in some military drills and the simulators, so he gets angry, and then Commander Kelly asks Topa to shadow her for a few days each week, so that he can learn what it's like to be a Union Navy officer, as that's why he got so mad about doing poorly in the military tests, as he wants to take a real test at some point for the Union Point, which I'm guessing is the Union Academy for Navy officers.
Commander, I'm interested in taking the Union Point entrance examination.
We find out during this shadowing from Topa that he wants to do this because he feels incomplete in some way, and that he hopes by going into the military that he will finally get that and feel happiness for the first time. And, oh, Jesus Christ, that is sad on a bunch of different levels. Firstly, for the fact that a child is talking about what sounds a lot like some serious mental problems, and secondly, that they are accurately showcasing how the military acts as some sort of catch-all system for those struggling in life to get suckered into becoming killing machines that are let loose on civilians overseas and then dumped back home with no proper vet care or anything in a decade.
Flat out, is the United States of America failing its veterans?
We've had a level of structural dysfunction.
We then get to a scene that we actually want to spend some time on. A scene where Kelly talks to Bortus and Clyden about Topa. wanting to go over what Topa revealed with his parents for obvious reasons. This being the sort of shit that a parent should be concerned over. Clyden is still being kind of an ass towards women, specifically towards Kelly in this scene, because what do you expect? A sexist is gonna sexist after all. And we see that the Topa sex change thing has well and truly remained a pretty nasty sticking point for this relationship, despite the fact that they do love each other. And that Clyden is very opposed to the notion of telling Topa anything about their status as a... what is the right terminology here? A force masculinized, biologically ID'd as female who has been raised in the gender of male since birth with supporting surgeries? Is that the right thing? There's gotta be a shorter word for all of that.
Matter on several occasions, and we feel...
We do not feel the time is right.
But all we really have is Topa. Well, Kelly suggests to them that maybe Topa is unhappy because they can sense something is wrong with them, that they're not sure what that is, and it's having residual ripples that they cannae possibly fathom, which gets shut down pretty immediately by Clyden, who claims that all children are unhappy, a presumably favourite perspective of the abusive parent.
This kid is unhappy.
All children are unhappy. He will outgrow it.
It's not your fault if it's just how children naturally are after all. And this all leads to Bortus and Clyden argument number 5 goddamn billion, as Bortus suggests that maybe Kelly has a point, and Clyden says that she is a woman, what could she know, and that Topa is better off being miserable and not knowing than knowing and dealing with the shame of it. Yeah, this relationship feels like it's permanently on the rocks, and it's inevitable that this is going to blow up eventually, I think. Clyden is really putting a lot of their own feelings about their own birth situation, the fact that they went through the same thing. They're letting that colour the way that they view Topa's experience of it, without bothering to ask him.
I would give anything to be ignorant of my beginnings.
And I am sure there is some kind of discussion here to be had about the way that members of the same community can face hardships in different ways and perceive their own struggles and lives in a very different light that changes how they approach their identities. And yeah, that probably is actually a pretty fair meta commentary to go with about Clyden. Topa gets forbidden from training further with Kelly, as Clyden doesn't want him to be spending more time with women. There is some stuff here about how Topa looks at Kelly and wants to be like her, feels a connection towards her, and that's actually the closest that this whole story arc has gotten to some kind of trans-aligned perspective on growing up.
I could someday be like you, have a noble purpose to inspire people to become their best selves.
I mean, it's interesting, but Topa doesn't actually get much trans stuff in the early time periods, because they don't question their gender identity and adjust it until these later points. And those are the features that do speak more to a trans experience than they do to an intersex issue like what we faced analogy-wise at the beginning. I'll get into that further in the conclusion, whenever the fuck that gets to be. I mean, these episodes just keep getting longer and longer, am I right? Kelly then makes a big call. A big call that is going to ripple out all over this episode, when she chooses to subtly push Topa into searching for Kimbok, which is the file that contains the information about Topa's sex change operation as a baby.
Sometimes when I'm feeling low, I have a slice of kimbok.
May I see it?
The file is password protected.
Little bit overstepping the bounds here. But also, I mean, she was doing it because she felt like Topa was in serious danger of suicidal depression. There are perspectives here, and ultimately mine is, of course, Jesus Christ, I don't support what happened to Topa, and withholding that information is certainly not gonna end well anyways. Which, yeah, directly leads to Topa getting mad at both his parents for the fact that he was born female, and that they lied to him about it, and continue to still lie to him when he confronts them on it.
Topa,
answer me.
How could you possibly ask such a thing?
Answer me!
Topa is understandably mad about this, especially because when a parental figure lies to you, it's very hurtful. especially with how Clyden jumps on this and pushes the malformed line that doesn't really hold much water when Topa explains how their body has been screaming at them that they are something else and that they didn't know what that meant until this moment.
I may appear to be male. What is inside me still exists. It is why I have felt the way I have for so long.
Ortus finally shuts down Clyden pretty hard here, and explains to Topa that Moklet and its teachings are imperfect, and that he loves Topa no matter what happens, or what he was born as. A pretty important point to make in the face of Clyden's bigotry. Clyden then storms off to go and fight Kelly, and Kelly lets loose with everything that she has been keeping locked up about the situation, specifically bringing up a line that has some implications that maybe we should see as problematic. This one here.
Underneath that manufactured exterior, Topa is still female.
Now, do you see how this could very easily be taken as anti-transgender? That no matter what you might do, you cannot change the inherent sex-based gender identity that would be assigned to you, and that Topa represents that inherency in the narrative here, and how Kelly is approaching it. Do you see how this gets all kind of muddied and difficult to navigate when the lingo and language bounces all over the place with what it is trying to represent, and how we are meant to see it? Because if I was just approaching this from an intersex perspective and as an intersex storyline, then I could maybe see this, and maybe see what they were going for here. Despite the fact that I don't necessarily agree with tying someone's innate sense of self to biological elements that they had at birth, but this was laid out as a transgender thing by a lot of sources, and in that sense, I don't think this is good or helpful to put on our community at all as representation.
You want to perform
a transgender operation on a baby?
Kelly then gets another intrusion by Bortus this time, who wants her help with trying to figure out how to get Topa to talk to them, as Topa is shutting them out thanks to that whole "my parents who I trust and listen to lied to me for my entire life about who I am, and that has made me lose that faith that I had in them," which makes a lot of sense and will take a lot of time to repair.
I require your help.
Of course.
Topa will not speak to Clyden. Or to me.
It also turns out that Bortus had a hand in this revelation as well, as he was the one who gave Topa the password when Topa looked into the file that Kelly directed Topa towards. Topa and Kelly then have a talk, because this show is frankly a whole lot of talking, honestly. And he wants to know what he does now, how he approaches the fact that he feels like a female, and that he has no real idea of how to approach that gender despite wishing to be one.
I wish I could meet a Moclan female, but my father would never allow it.
We are sort of walking our way back into trans-analogous territory here because the discussion around gender identity and how we present ourselves, especially when how we present might break with traditional views upon society, though that can also still be the intersex discussion that exists metaphysically here too. As communities, there is a bit of overlap with characters and audiences and struggles, so it's not unreasonable for trans and intersex people to share some spotlights together, though I would hope that a show produced with this much money and time and effort would have done better to get consultation to ensure that it's not so muddied in its relation to the audience about the communities that it's supposedly showing. I'm saying be more clear, be more decisive on what you are analogous to, because otherwise people get it mixed up. Topa watches the Havana speech from the trial, and clearly has an emotional breakthrough with what the character says, specifically around her claims about being happy as who she is, and that taking that away from the child could hurt him or her. I say that because Topa uses this as an opportunity to come out as female, to choose to be that gender, and that people who are not bigoted pieces of shit like Clyden take this opportunity to change how they refer to Topa, not as he, but as she. Clyden clings desperately here to the idea that Topa is not old enough to decide, that she doesn't know what she wants, that she has no idea what is going to happen for her.
He does not understand what awaits him.
Really? You've been telling her since she was a young child that females are garbage.
Yeah, that's all a lot of trans-related rhetoric that I've heard around trans kids, so tick on that one, and I appreciate my boy Bortus coming out in support of his child, regardless of what she is. This continues further into the fact that Topa wants to reverse the surgeries on her, to return her body to what it originally was before the forced sex change at birth. A development that kinda goes back over that line into the intersex camp.
She wants her physical body to represent its origins.
And obviously that's possible.
It is possible, yes.
Pointing out the hypocrisy of how Clyden doesn't believe that Topa can choose to do this as a child, when he forcibly did this to her as a baby. And despite the fact that it's a simple and easily reversed surgery on both sides. You see what I mean here, right? We're stuck spinning two plates from two different angles, and both plates are overlapping in some places, one labeled trans, one labeled intersex, but are distinctly different plates that need to be understood as not the same as one another. Regardless, this all comes down to Bortus, as it turns out that Topa can't go through with this reverse surgery without the approval of at least one parent/guardian under union law. And therefore, despite Clyden's protestations, they cannot stop this if Bortus agrees to it. Clyden chooses this moment to do that toxic relationship thing that we've been playing with the whole time, threatening to leave Bortus as they view keeping a traditional Moclan family as more important than the happiness of those within it.
If you do this, I will leave you. I swear it.
Some real nasty shit that, I don't know, maybe a couple of y'all in the audience might be able to click with as resembling your own families or members of your family around LGBTQI plus shenanigans that happened with someone coming out. Oh, and that other thing that keeps coming up, remember that thing about a nation needing to maintain diplomatic ties with one that is engaging in behaviors or actions that disagrees with on the surface, choosing to let those unethical things slide so that they can keep access to their connections.
But our hands are tied. I'm very sorry.
Well, that also rears its head here, as they go to the Union Admiralty on Bortus' suggestion and get told directly by the Council that the Doctor is suggested to not go ahead with the reverse sex change, as it would jeopardize Moclan-human relations at a time when the war with vague, threatening enemy is at its height. It's rough being an LGBTQIA+ kid when your entire identity is being bandied about by people in the highest offices of the political powers that controls your very lives.
When does it stop? When do I get to decide how to live my own life?
This whole thing just sucks, and the crew is understandably pretty miffed by it. Pretty miffed by the fact that they're being told to tell a child that she has to live a lie to keep a political alliance alive, and that she can't even go elsewhere to get the surgery done, as the Moclans would immediately seize her and jail her for what she represents. As Topa says, this is unfair. She doesn't get to live her own life, and it gets decided by others for her, and that if they insist she is male, then that is what she will be. Some shit that I think does speak to an experience that some states in the US are forcing on the trans kids within them right now. Passing laws that deny those kids the chance to live their lives as they want to be, and how that is causing kids to have to become activists, to have to fight for their lives, to feel as if they're being attacked by the entire government, and hurting their parents who want to help them and are not able to support them while they are in those states where those parents can get jailed for just being supportive of their trans kids.
For supporting her child, she could one day run afoul of Tennessee law.
You know what I'm actually thinking? This show could really do with having a human trans person appear at some point here, and communicate with Topa, or a human intersex person, and give us some sort of conversation between them that can better reiterate these points in a more blatant fashion, rather than just hand-waving at them, and then just stating in interviews how it's meant to be a transgender allegory or whatever. I'm saying do the effort here of making it clear exactly what you're trying to tell the audience morally. Do more internal universe work to make it clear for an audience is I guess what I'm asking for here. because audiences are fucking dumb and will go out of their way to deny any kind of LGBTQIA related shit when they don't have it literally shoved down their throats. Anyways, the crew circumvents the situation by having the robot, who isn't an official Union doctor, perform the surgery against direct stated orders, and that way they had no involvement in it and the Union cannot be blamed.
Isaac, I am officially ordering you not to interfere, which means if you did this, you would be doing it on your own.
It's kind of like DIY estrogen supplies in those aforementioned transphobic states. Getting young people what they need to live as they are and avoiding the laws. So Bortus sings some songs to distract the crew, don't ask questions, and Topa gets the reverse sex change operation done. Despite some hesitancy and fears about whether this will be right for them, which are ultimately defeated by how badly she wants to go through with what she feels is her only good option.
Maybe I would not be so nervous.
I will make sure that you are safe. You do not need to be afraid.
Oh, and that robot tears down Clyden both in mental argument about his cultural bigotries and by crushing his hand when Clyden tries to interfere.
I surmise your capacity to reason has been compromised by your cultural indoctrination.
Topa then gets to be physically what she feels like, and gets a big old euphoric moment seeing herself in the mirror for the first time in a way that she likes. The captain and commander get reamed out by the admiral for the fact that the surgery happened. The Mocklans are super mad about what went down, though they back down over the fact that the Kalons being literally about to wipe out the Union makes them not want to leave it at that moment. Clyden abandons his family because he cannot stand to be around them with Topa as a girl, specifically leading to this interaction.
I love you.
I wish you were never born.
Damn, does that suck. Despite Bortus attempting to soften the blow by being kind, it really doesn't help to hear a parent tell you what Clyden tells Topa. Regardless though, Topa seems to be happy, and even gets invited to sit in the captain's chair at the end of the episode, as part of that full circle from her pretending to be in a captain's chair at the beginning to actually being in one by the end. Some sort of meta-commentary maybe. And that's it.
Engage quantum drive.
So we're 3 episodes down, 1 to go, and I'm hoping that the case I'm trying to make about the Orville and representation is getting made here and reinforced. If it isn't, then Jesus Christ, what the hell is going wrong here? I cannot be spending this much time to not get things across to you. We don't have the time to waste on that though, as the next episode, Season 3's Episode 8, Midnight Blue, an episode all about Havana's Mocklan female sanctuary, Mocklan politics, and Topa having a crush on someone, is 90 minutes long.
Hell no, to the no, no, no.
That's right, a whole ass hour and 30, as long as the first 2 episodes we covered combined. Which means I've got to do some serious compression work here to get my point across, and to make sure that this doesn't end up being another 7,000 goddamn words, because I'm not doing it. Let's try and keep it tight here, folks. On that note, the episode begins with Bortus having issues with his child. Her not opening up to him about the fact that she is into a boy, and how he goes to Kelly to get her to talk to Topa for him, and convey some parental messages about romance that he maybe doesn't feel fully able to.
There are days when I would rather confront a fleet of Krill battlecruisers than parent a child.
I guess at this point, Kelly is basically a third party in this co-parenting situation, which makes a lot more sense when you remember that one of those parents was a bigoted piece of shit who bounced when their kid de-sex changed and gender transitioned from their very much assigned and enforced gender. It really takes a ship to raise a child, especially a trans or intersex child or whatever Topa is. That all goes swimmingly when unfortunately the Orville has to go on an inspection of Sanctuary with the Mocklans, just to make sure that Sanctuary is abiding by all those bullshit rules put on it a few episodes ago.
They'll be looking for any indication that she's broken her word to stop smuggling newborn females off Moklas.
Basically, the Mocklans are convinced that Hivana is smuggling young women from Moklas before they can be turned into men, and are looking for an excuse to shut down and destroy this whole affront to their culture. Topa goes along with the expedition to the planet, meets some of those Mocklans who hate her for what she represents, being a male who de-maled in a system where being male was everything and became female, with the commander of the Mocklans named Codon calling Topa a disgusting creation.
Disgusting creature.
Ortis.
Hivana then meets Topa, hits it off really well, introducing her to Dolly Parton and being significantly more nice towards Topa, though some of that niceness is part of Hivana wanting to use Topa to get messages to a contact in Moklas that would allow Hivana to do the smuggling of females, because of course she's breaking the rules.
We have re-established our underground network to rescue female infants.
This was literally a revolutionary who the last time we saw her was saying, "This is only the beginning and we're not done fighting yet." Like, duh, she was gonna go against the ruling that she didn't like, the ruling which was allowing a massively unethical gender/sex-based erasure to continue.
The revolution has begun. We will rise, one small victory at a time.
Topa then gets grabbed by a Mocklan soldier when coming back from hanging out with Hivana. The expedition finds her missing the next day, and they begin trying to hunt her down. That Mocklan commander from earlier is continuing to still be a terrible person, and aggressively insults Topa for who she is.
Tell me, little worm, were you this impotent before they cut off your flesh?
Seth decides to bring the Orville into Sanctuary's orbit to find out what is going on the ground, as nobody has relayed anything to him, despite this breaking the agreement with Moklas, and all the stages are set now for a big old intergalactic war to break out once again over gender between species. The gender wars, but for real this time, not the fake made-up bullshit that places like the Daily Wire are espousing. The Orville brings Hivana on board. She admits that she used Topa for the greater good to Dolly Parton when they used Dolly Parton's simulation to get Hivana to open up.
If you do the right thing in the here and now, the future has a way of taking care of itself.
And Hivana also agrees to testify before the Union Council about the illegal smuggling that she was doing. Topa gets tortured by a Mocklan agent on a secret military base in the same system as the Mocklan females. What the fuck are they doing there? Oh, those naughty Mocklans being all evil and sinister. What a shame that they have guns and manufacturing that makes it so easy to just turn a blind eye to all the ways they defy the Union constantly. Bortus and Kelly break into this base to rescue Topa, while at the same time Hivana confesses to the Council as a way of getting Moklas to release Topa. But the Mocklans refuse an investigation into Sanctuary, fearing what it would reveal about all of their super dodgy dealings that we have covered almost every single goddamn episode of this video. Seriously, the Mocklan government sucks.
This council has no valid reason to conduct an investigation of my government or any of my people.
We jump to a severely wounded Topa, giving up the name of the agent and the encryption frequencies, and just before she's about to be killed, Bortus and Kelly burst in, brutalize the torturer for what he did, and then get onto their shuttle and get the hell out of there. As the council is getting bogged down by the Mocklan ambassador, and he announces that because of everything that happened, the Mocklans are going to disobey the agreement and take Sanctuary, Topa and Bortus enter the room and reveal exactly what happened at the illegal Mocklan black site, to which the council members of the other nations stand up in solidarity with Topa and her struggle against Moklas, finally unified by the suffering of a child to do something about the Mocklans and expel them from the Union.
Members of this Union planned to kill my child.
Wow, I wish our international body was so able to be convinced by shit like this. You just know they would get sad, vote to sanction whoever did it, and then it would all get vetoed by Russia or the US or China. The deaths of children apparently don't matter, and we're totally fucked. Shock, horror, surprise though, as we near the end of the episode, and find none other than Clyden entering the sickbay, tearfully telling his daughter how sorry he is for all the hurtful things he has said, and refusing to let her forgive him for what he did. Also saying that he has finally let go of his bigoted beliefs and accepts her for who she is. The Moclan family is all together and will remain on the Orville, having renounced their Moclan citizenship to keep their daughter safe. And that's that.
We have renounced our Moclan citizenship. Our home is here now.
Okay, legitimately, despite what you might think about me and my videos, what a great summary right there, right? I really took a long and frankly a bit too dragged out episode and turned it into a nice, quick paragraph or two. It also helped a lot, actually, that there really wasn't anything here that we hadn't already gone over in depth from previous episodes. It mostly serving as a nice capstone for the arc on both the Moclan political front and the domestic Topa, Bortus, Clyde and Kelly family front. You know, both of them ended up in a place that is positive, that is improving for the best. A hopeful direction being pointed to in how people come round to doing the right thing, and trying to protect those who are in trouble or suffering. And with all of that wrapped up, I now have to do the incredibly hard job of concluding what the fuck even happened here. Because let's face it, a big thing I want to hammer home is the fact that despite Seth MacFarlane deliberately saying this is a trans allegory or trans metaphor, and using the term trans surgery to describe the sex change on a child, all stuff that brought me to investigating this in the first place, so I wanted to make sure the cis people were getting the right stuff told to them. But despite all of that, this really isn't a transgender episode in the character that it represents.
You soldiered through the storm of a repressive system that smothered your identity.
Does it have features that overlap with a trans journey? Messages that align with trans experiences and reactions that are ones recognizable in the anti-trans opposition? Yeah, sure, it absolutely does have all of that, and I would be a fool to deny the fact that you can find that stuff in there if you're looking for it. But to completely ignore the much more accurate and much more real analogy for Topa and her story, that of an intersex person and the struggles that the intersex community go through, would be to do them a disservice that the show has already done by not giving them a spotlight here. It is a really huge missed opportunity, and it's the kind of missed opportunity that led to a lot of trans people being rightfully pretty confused watching this, and not really getting why we are talking about Topa in the first episode, especially as a trans thing.
This is not an illness. Your child was born female. I got news for you. It happens all the time.
Not really a solid move to relate trans stuff to a baby being forcibly masculinized because of cultural stuff. That's not really exactly our deal. Nobody's arguing that babies should have surgeries except for the cis people who want to correct intersex people into a binary gender. The later bits of Topa's story, it's about her having to be forced to remain a male, those are more trans. It just all feels like a complete lack of consultation and involvement from anyone in the LGBTQIA+ community. Because surely one of us would have picked up on that and pointed out to Big Daddy Seth the mistake he was making there. A mistake that does lead to some lines that contradict one another, or that actually make points against what he thinks he is saying from a trans-positive standard. Like the whole biologically inherent femaleness of Topa that Kelly espouses in the Tale of Two Topas.
Underneath that manufactured exterior, Topa is still female.
And that brings us to the other big part of the conclusion. The part that recognizes that this is a fourth entry in the Seth MacFarlane representation tale, and therefore has to comment on whether he has improved, whether he has stepped in the right direction.
Yeah, you know, it seems like we're always on shaky ground with them, doesn't it? Always bending over backwards to accommodate their bullshit.
Well, much like the Union in this show, he is certainly getting there. It's a big step up from Family Guy and Cleveland Show in regards to it not directly mocking the trans analogy as a man in a dress and drawing the audience to feeling disgust for us.
Just a vast sea of chubby theys and thems, so coddled by their sanctimonious woke parents.
It's hard to get much worse than that, frankly, but there is definitely a slow, accepting trajectory to the inclusion of queer stuff in Seth's work. A slowness that might be a tad too slow for the way that culture is moving, and that really has you thinking that he should get some younger people advising him on it to help out. Regardless, with all of that taken into account, I would give this a tentative thumbs up. It's not deliberately harmful, mostly been shitty in its misapplications of wordings and misunderstandings more than anything, and it is trying to spin queer stuff in a positive light for its audience, and not as something that is deserving of mockery/comedy. Could be better, could be a whole lot worse. And that's the Orville, baby!
Oh, that's great, thanks.
If you liked what I did here, or enjoyed my commentary, or learnt something, or just found it to be acceptable background noise for whatever you're actually focusing on, hey, hope that game is going well, or that Magic the Gathering deck you're putting together works out, or the food you cooked up came out good, or that artwork you're working on gets finished. Well, that's the case, then consider liking, sharing, subscribing, commenting, and checking out the other videos that I have made. We've got a lot of stuff covering a whole host of different places that I've gone digging for trans representation and trans allegories, and also a stupidly long Harry Potter video. If you really liked what I did, then you can go to my Patreon and subscribe, or here on YouTube as a member. Those in the $5 and up category should be scrolling past the screen right now, and I really appreciate everyone on there for helping me to make this kind of stuff, for allowing me to do these deep dives and explorations that take up a lot of time and could not be finished as smoothly or quickly if I was stuck working full-time somewhere else. It really does mean the world to me to be able to do what I do here, and to have people like it enough to consider financially supporting me for it. Also, look, a cat. A cat who a lot of the money goes on to because he's a little bastard who destroys toys like it's no tomorrow. He started moving on to my nice leather chairs, which are not so nice anymore since he got his claws into them. Didn't you, Merlin? Yeah, you little rat bastard. Anyways, thank you for watching the video, and I hope you have a great day. Say something, Merlin. No? Nothing? Well, I get your claw out there. That's all from me and him. Ain't it? Oh, God. God, God damn it, those claws. So sharp. Why are they so sharp? He's a little weirder. You know? This is the money. This is where Patreon's going. It's going right to him.